Hi, folks, and welcome back to the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print. And we are in 1987 of December to talk about a very unique Star Wars item or publishing or story. We don't really think about this or hear about it, but it's actually something from Blackthorn Publishing. Usually, when we think of Star Wars in the comic book sense and any stories from the Star Wars comics, usually it's going to be Dark Horse or Marvel. Um, Obviously, no one really talks about Star, which was the Marvel Comics imprint that did the Ewoks and droids, but now we're talking about Blackthorn. So they were also someone who did a Star Wars comic, a very, very short lived, only 3 issues of this series. But they did do this. It's, like I said, December of 1987, this comes out. And it was called Star Wars 3D. This is the first issue here. Now, of course, I have this in trade format. You can find this in Star Wars Omnibus Wild Space Volume 1, which this might be, on a side note, and I think I've said it before in other episodes here, this is probably going to be the best omnibus that you could find with Star Wars stuff. This has so much hard to find content in it. Probably the best omnibus Dark Horse put out during their time with Star Wars. So, um, there were a lot of 3D comics, just to kind of get in the history of it. There were a lot of 3D comics that Blackthorn did. There were a lot of different subjects that they tackled, and other characters and whatnot in franchises. But obviously, we're only going to talk about Star Wars. This was by uh, La Wayne, or La Wayne, I think is how you pronounce the name, and art by Glenn Johnson and Jim Nelson. Now, timeline wise, this takes place in 080Y, so right shortly after the Battle of Yavin. So in issue 1, Luke Skywalker is looking for someone to give the Lars, homestead to, the moisture farm to. Um, Basically, he's like, I don't have a need for it. I'm trying to find a way to get rid of it. And basically, he takes it. He goes to Tatooine, and he basically gives it to Throg. He meets Throg, and he takes it. That's about it. Issue number 2 came out in 1988, and it's called Havoc on Hoth. And in this issue, they find Hoth, and on it, the smuggler Salmak, hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, who basically, he's hired and he tries to capture Han for the bounty that Jabba the Hutt has placed on him. There are the contradictions, though, of when was Hoth discovered. We see that in the newspaper strips. We see that in a few other things as well, trying to figure out when exactly was Hoth discovered by the rebels. This kind of contradicts that. Obviously, you have the newspaper strips saying that that is what happened. Luke accidentally discovered it. Here it's, oh, we find Hoth in here. So that's a contradiction in the overall Star Wars Expanded Universe. So some issues there. The last issue is called The Dark Side of Dantooine. And Luke tries to train under the Fair Folk. And basically, they're these force-sensitive beings. He kind of sees it as, hey, I need to train. He doesn't know about Yoda's existence yet, and he's trying to, say, I need to pick up where Obi-Wan left off. And but of course, it's a trap. These fair folk, they work for Darth Vader, and of course, hilarity ensues. That's about it. It was just 3 issues. In the original, you'd have, I'm not too sure about the 3D. In here, the copies that I have are all in black and white. So, for example, here's a splash page here. This is how it comes in the omnibus. It's all in black and white, because that's how it was. It was a black and white thing, and it was kind of meant to, kind of bounce off the page a little bit. That does not happen here. you know, it is kind of interesting. I do kind of like the black and white aspect. Like, this is from issue 3, with Darth Vader and whatnot. Um, it's an interesting timepiece, honestly. It's an interesting piece um, again, Star Wars publishing. It's kind of one of those unique things that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about, in terms of that. I mean, granted, it's nothing too special, but for me, it was interesting to see what became of the Lars homestead. For me, it was interesting to kind of see Luke attempt to do, and you know, try and do some things. We see it a little bit in other parts of the expanded universe, but it was kind of cool to see another aspect of him trying to figure out, where do I go from here with my Jedi training? Where do I go in terms of picking up where I was left off? Because, you know, he really wasn't trained that long under Obi-Wan, really. So for me, that was interesting. But again, it goes back to the question that we always ask here. Is this an essential read? Or is Star Wars 3D in this omnibus, or whatever, however you get your hands on it, is it essential? Is it a essential read? No, absolutely not. It's not. It's, like I said, it's a nice piece. It's a nice time capsule, I guess, of that. Kind of like what I've said about the Ewoks and droids. It's kind of a nice. It's a very obscure piece. It's a very interesting piece. Kind of that 3D craze that was going on in the 80s. And you know, Star Wars was now a part of that. It was kind of interesting to see that. Um, there are a couple contradictions, obviously, but other than those few plot points that I mentioned that interested me personally, there's just a lot of meh plot lines. I mean, and again, I mean, it's to be understandable. Again, we're moving into, to me, we have now officially moved into the dark times of Star Wars. We have Weston Games now carrying the torch, and that's about it. Until the next episode, where we will talk about the revival of the Star Wars franchise and a book that changed a lot of things for the Star Wars universe, specifically the Star Wars Expanded Universe when it comes to publishing. But we'll talk about that in the next video. We'll see you then.